and Social Service is going to present virtually.
Good morning, Dr. Sullivan. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good morning.
I can.
Good morning. Morning, Paul. Can you hear me? Allison and Michael,
Yes, I can.
You can? Thanks. And also, Allison and Michael, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Do you see me? Do you see all the members of the Budget Committee?
Yes, we do.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we're on, sir.
Dr. Sullivan, the floor is all yours.
Good morning. I will start sharing my screen so that you can see our slides for today. And then when I'm finished with the formal presentation, I will unshare the screen and we will field any questions you may have. We have quite a bit to cover this morning in a short period of time, so I will talk a little bit more rapidly than you are used to, but I think we have some exciting things to share and lots of things to discuss this morning, and it's a privilege to be with you this morning. And so here we go. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present some of the incredible work of FSSA since our last meeting. I'm Dr. Jennifer Sullivan. I'm the Secretary of the Indiana Family and Social Services Administration. This is my third budget session with you all, and it is an honor to be here this morning. As most of you know, I am also a practicing pediatric emergency medicine physician, and during 2020, more than particularly ever in my career, it has been a privilege to serve on the front lines and continue to see and treat children and their families in the Riley Hospital for Children every Tuesday. This has allowed us to stay abreast of the needs of our fellow Hoosiers during this time of crisis. It is my sincere hope that each of you are safe and well, and it is my I want to express my gratitude for the chairman to allow us to avail ourselves of the virtual technology that you are seeing today as much as possible in the coming months. COVID vaccinations began yesterday in Indiana. It was a historic day for us, and I'm incredibly proud to have been part of the team to support that work. I consider every hospitalization and every death in our great state from here forward to be preventable, and I hope that we will all continue to exercise the greatest precautions to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe across the state. I would also like to welcome the new members of this committee. FSSA is a powerful engine for good, and I am available for any and all questions or feedback on how we can use this tool together for the future. Finally, I hope that you had the opportunity to read our budget transmittal letter that accompanies this presentation. It truly is a work of art and a comprehensive overview of the work that's been done this year for 2020 for the betterment of Hoosiers. We didn't realize that in 2019 that we were preparing for a pandemic, but we certainly were, and you'll see the results of this labor in part of our presentation today. I look forward to the partnership over the coming months of developing the FSSA budget to best serve Hoosiers. Overview of our presentation today will start with mission and vision, our division overview for a reminder of the scope and portfolio of our practice at the agency priorities, 2020 successes, a brief list of 2021 and 22 goals, and then our fiscal year 2022 and 2023 budget requests. We had the opportunity to revise our mission and vision statements this year. We did that first in 2018, and given some of the happenings across the state this year, we took the opportunity to bring the whole agency together to really refocus and retool these statements. I think you'll find them to be incredibly powerful and compelling. Our mission statement is to compassionately serve our diverse community of Hoosiers by dismantling longstanding, persistent inequity through deliberate human services system improvement. And you'll see evidence of that in our presentation today. Our vision statement is that all Hoosiers should live in fully engaged communities and reach their greatest emotional, mental, and physical well-being. Just a quick overview of our FSSA divisions. We have 8. The first is the Division of Aging, and the Division of Aging's goal in one sentence is to keep as many people at home to age as possible. And they do that through multiple different programs. They support alternatives to nursing home care and coordinate services through our network of area agencies on aging. Some of their many programs include the Adult Protective Services Program, the Money Follows the Person program that helps individuals leave nursing homes with extra support to get home, home and community-based services, which include a series of providers that provide not only medical services, but also activities of daily living supports for individuals in their homes. We have a long-term care ombudsman that protects individuals and helps receive complaints and make things better for individuals living at home. The InConnect Alliance, which is a network of providers that help advertise and keep connections on all of the services available to individuals as they age. And then one of the things we love is our Golden Hoosier Awards every year, where we recognize volunteers in the aging space. The Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services is a huge umbrella encompassing multiple supports to help manage the delivery of services in the field to children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are multiple bureaus within the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. Those include the Bureau of Developmental Disabilities, the Bureau of Quality Improvement, Vocational Rehabilitation, Blind and Visual Impaired Services, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, and one of my favorites, First Steps, that helps to support children from birth to 3 who are at risk for developmental disabilities to reach their greatest potential from the moment they are born. We then have the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. This is also a vast array of services across the state that helps to supervise and credential early childcare programs. We do this within the philosophy of something called Paths to Quality, so that childcare is not just a safe place for a child to go while their parent is at work or at school, but also as a place to learn. And we have watched the Paths to Quality system grow and thrive over the last 4 years, in part due to the support that you have given us to grow the On My Way pre-K program for 4-year-olds to become a statewide service. We also coordinate connecting families to childcare through one of our most popular websites, which is the Child Care Finder at childcarefinder.in.gov. We also coordinate with the federal programs, Head Start and Early Head Start, for those seats to help children get ready for school in the K-12 space. We also, through this program, administer the CCDF, or Child Care Development Fund, that allows parents and caregivers who are low income to have vouchers for high quality childcare across the state. Next is our Division of Family Resources. DFR is in every single county in Indiana, and this is where eligibility occurs across the state. Eligibility for Medicaid, SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or it used to be called food stamps, our cash assistance program, which is called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. The DFR program also administers the Medicaid Burial Program. There are 110 offices across Indiana, and one of our greatest achievements during the pandemic this year was the completion of the integrated eligibility system across Indiana called IEDS. It is fully complete, and every Hoosier that is receiving services through Medicaid, TANF, and SNAP is now on this modern program that allows us to communicate much more efficiently and effectively and get people the things that they need, where they are, and when they need them the most. Our next division is the Office of Medicaid Policy and Planning, and Medicaid administers health coverage programs, including the Healthy Indiana Plan, Hoosier HealthWise, Hoosier Care Connect, and our fee-for-service waivers that cover individuals who are receiving care in the long-term services and support space, serious mental illness, and disabilities. We also, in this, integrate the CHIP program, or Children's Health Insurance Program, that has higher eligibility limits for children in Indiana. The Division of Mental Health and Addiction has been active and supporting individuals, not just pre-pandemic, but certainly in the pandemic has been firing on all cylinders. The Division of Mental Health and Addiction works with a network of mental health providers known as CMHCs, or Community Mental Health Centers, and OTPs, which are opiate treatment programs. We also operate a 6 psychiatric hospital network, and we fund addiction prevention and treatment programs through the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. The Neurodiagnostic Institute celebrated its 1-year anniversary of opening back in March. It is the first new state psychiatric hospital in over 50 years. And we're incredibly proud of the work that this network has done to serve individuals with serious mental illness. Next is the Disability Determination Bureau. Many people forget this is under the umbrella of FSSA, but DDB makes medical determinations of eligibility for Social Security disability and Social Security income. And we are very proud of the work that DDB has done this year, being fully functional and open throughout the entire pandemic to serve the needs of Hoosiers. Our newest division is Indiana 211, and incredible gratitude to the General Assembly from our 2019 session for unanimously voting to incorporate Indiana 211 into FSSA. Again, we didn't know then that we were preparing for a pandemic, but this tool has been absolutely remarkable in helping us meet the needs of Hoosiers during the pandemic, especially during the time of shutdown. Indiana 211 is a free service that connects Hoosiers with help and answers from thousands of health and human services agencies, not just our own, and resources right in their local communities quickly, easily, and confidentially. I'd like to introduce you quickly to the leadership team for 211. Tara Morse is the executive director for 211. Her deputy director is Jamie Farron, and Peggy Welch, who is our chief advocacy officer at FSSA, is the community and local liaison for local governments and local community organizations to make sure that the service is working at its highest level. The integration of 211 formally began July 1st, but we certainly began that partnership in the beginning of March with the pandemic, and the transition period will be complete on January 4th of 2021. Quickly moving through our 2020 successes, I certainly could not list them all, but I will give some very quick highlights as we move forward. Our COVID accomplishments come first. This was an incredible time of innovation and partnership across multiple entities to make sure that human services delivery was rapidly and comprehensively and nimbly meeting the needs of Hoosiers for pandemic response. First and foremost, all of our services that are covered by Indiana Medicaid and many other programs converted to telehealth so that no one would miss a beat when receiving their health care. I'll say that telehealth in partnership with you this session will be a huge focus for the agency, as we have many lessons learned and many successes to tell you about, specifically in the behavioral health space, where telehealth services meeting people where they are has been absolutely extraordinary to watch. We also converted to in-person telephonic appointments for all of our agencies. So the Disability Determination Bureau, the Division of Family Resources, and the Disability and Rehabilitative Services Division have been functioning as if nothing had ever happened, making sure that we meet the needs of Hoosiers who need us. We also developed the COVID Daily Digest, which is the evidence-based platform using all of the academic institutions across the state through our state academic partnership that was put into place in 2019. If you have a chance or haven't yet looked at this resource, it is what has allowed us to be data-driven and evidence-based across all of our agencies for the entire COVID response. We also developed Operation Food to make sure that our most vulnerable Hoosiers were receiving their unmet food needs throughout the pandemic. The Operation Food has many components, some of which we are most proud is the map that has never been done before. It is on the FSSA website if you want to look at it. It has updated maps that have all the contact information for where food can be located in communities. Also part of Operation Food was converting SNAP to delivery opportunities. This has absolutely revolutionized our ability to close food deserts across Indiana, and we look forward to sharing the data and findings around SNAP delivery policy change. We were the 6th in the nation to implement SNAP delivery, and now 49 of 50 states have SNAP delivery as part of their programs. We also delivered pandemic EBT cards to over 700,000 children and their families across the state to help support those children who are not in school and not able to receive their free and reduced lunch programs. This has now been touted at the federal level as state best practice on how to do pandemic EBT delivery. FSSA also coordinated with multiple partners across the state to build out safe recovery sites. These are hotels, apartment complexes in 12 networks that cover the entire state to allow individuals who are at risk or experiencing homelessness and have COVID to find a place to safely stay where they can be monitored and supported throughout their quarantine and isolation. This has been, I would say, probably one of our most heartwarming and compelling programs through the pandemic, and has served to date nearly 2,000 people statewide. We also have had incredibly innovative substance use disorders supports to make sure that individuals who are entering recovery or in recovery can maintain that safely. We also have supported childcare through dedicated CARES CCDF dollars to make sure that childcares were able to open with us as we reopen the economy through this process. We have similarly supported with CARES dollars and coronavirus relief funds that I'll share with you a little bit later in the presentation, supports to our disability services and our aging services to make sure that they were able to take care of Hoosiers at high risk. We also, I think, have availed ourselves of every possible SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid waiver available at the federal government. I heard at our Medicaid monthly meeting yesterday that we have published over 119 bulletins in less than 9 months, which is definitely kicking aside an old record and making those policy supports available for healthcare coverage, food supports, and cash assistance for Hoosiers. Just as a quick example of what our work has looked like over the last 9 months, the Division of Family Resources processed over 1.1 million applications during the months between January and November of this year. April of 2020 had the highest volume with over 159,000 applications that we processed quickly and effectively. The April 2020 DFR application volume increased sharply from March, obviously, knowing that people were going to need additional coverage. Again, a couple of details on SNAP online purchasing that began in June of this year. 254,662 SNAP electronic benefit transfers were approved for purchase transactions for nearly $20 million of food support that allowed people to stay in their homes and receive their food safely. We have 2 partners in this work, Walmart and Amazon, and I am proud to announce that today we have a 3rd partner. Aldi goes live today as our 3rd partner, and we are looking forward to bringing more online and delivery vendors for SNAP online purchasing in the coming months. Again, to illustrate our pandemic EBT process, families who received free or reduced lunch prior to the pandemic provided these in 2 issuances. The spring issued over 600,000 students cards. The fall to a little over 250,000 students. We will be issuing our next round in January of this year, and that program has been approved by our federal partners. It was, again, the 4th approved plan and has been lauded as best practice for this for the nation. Some additional highlights, non-pandemic related, and I will not go into detail, but again, I alluded to our IEDS completion. Despite all of the work, all hands on deck for pandemic response, the integrated eligibility system is complete. We were successful in achieving an unprecedented 10-year renewal of the Healthy Indiana Plan at the federal level. This allows for stability within health coverage for Hoosiers and allows us to continue to innovate in the HIP space. We're also incredibly proud of cross-agency partnerships between DCS to support foster families receiving childcare vouchers for their children, and our DOC partnership with early childhood that allows moms and their babies who are leaving the DOC space and returning to their communities to have adequate quality childcare as they look for employment or education opportunities. We celebrated the 1-year anniversary of our new case management system for aging and disability. We have completed our several waiver rate methodology projects, one in the aging and disabled space and the other in traumatic brain injury. We also have approval for a brand new self-directed pilot service that allows for the performance of both skilled care and personal care in the home for individuals. And again, celebrated our NDI 1-year anniversary. I would like to quickly show you our brand new and first of its kind Hoosier Health and Wellbeing Atlas. 2 years ago, we added the Health Leads Social Determinants of Health screening questions. There are 10 of them to the end of every SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid application. And to date have nearly 500,000 responses that have allowed us to build a heat map for unmet social needs for the state. We've been using this to help us inform data-driven policy changes and updates within the agency. And in June, this turned this into a public resource so that local communities could partner with us in a data-driven way to better understand the unmet needs of their community members. This has never been done. It is the first and largest statewide heat map for unmet social needs in the country. This aggregates, again, 2 years of applicant data to help identify the most pressing needs of Hoosiers in their communities. It is voluntary, but Hoosiers want to tell us what they need so that we can respond to those things. And we're using this tool at the state and then also in communities to make sure our programs align with real and current needs of Hoosiers and allow communities to identify and prioritize emerging social needs. These are the 10 questions for your reference that we ask at the end of each of those applications. They are not related to eligibility. They are completely voluntary. And this is just a screenshot of what our Hoosier Health and Wellbeing Atlas looks like. It is done by county. All of the data is de-identified, and we have enough volume that each of those counties has sufficient population of data to be de-identified and statistically significant. All of the answers are done also by demographics, and so we can understand better what the unmet needs of our communities are. Just a few of our 2021 and 2022 goals. We are working diligently with the 1102 Task Force and stakeholders for our waiver redesign with the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. We are working at the criminal justice and mental health and addiction interface to help better serve individuals with mental health and substance use disorder issues who interface with the criminal justice system to better meet their needs. We also will continue to partner with the Department of Health to complete the OB Navigator project rollout. You will hear more about this afternoon from Dr. Box, and you will watch her face beam with pride as she tells you more about our historic work this last year of reducing Indiana's infant mortality. And I will not steal her thunder, but here's a primer for her great work that she'll tell you about this afternoon. We also have a priority to work with you on telehealth policy and the expansion of support for community health workers within Indiana Medicaid. I'll now just walk through briefly, and we'll certainly cover this in the question period that is coming up here shortly, our COVID-19 funding and how we have utilized that. This is CARES Act funding received from the federal government. This has been used to support multiple missions, congregate and home delivered meals, family and caregiver support services, our centers for independent living and those who support getting people home for services, child care centers. I was very lucky and fortunate to be able to testify at Congress on our child care center program. Again, lauded as a national model for efficient supports to child care centers to remain functional so that they could reopen and support families with the economy. Mental health services supports our ombudsman, making sure that nursing facilities had sufficient oversight, and refugee services. We've spent approximately $92 million and have all of the $103.4 million that has been received year to date has been allocated and will be spent by the time the end of the year rolls around December 31st. The next bucket of funding we received for coronavirus is the Coronavirus Relief Fund. We use this to support day service providers, and that gave funding to day services providers that have seen their programs shut down temporarily or have a decrease in enrollment. To home health providers as well, providing funding to home health providers to assist in covering increased costs related to the pandemic. Our HCBS providers, home and community-based services, also provided relief funding and group home providers to help cover additional costs like PPE related to the pandemic. Our safe recovery sites funded those safety recovery quarantine sites across the state for our homeless and at risk for homelessness populations. We also provided services and funding for nursing facilities with increased reimbursement to provide nursing facilities help to cover increased staffing and PPE costs. Our community mental health centers received funding due to a decrease in revenue seen by centers along with additional costs that they have incurred related to the pandemic. PEBT funding, this was given to cover the increased costs of releasing that PEBT issuance quickly. We also provided funding for the call center staff due to increased call volume with our applications. And then of course, PPE and cleaning were covered here as well. We will have plans to complete all of this by the expiration of coronavirus relief at the end of the year. And now into an overview of our request for 2022 and 2023. This budget was certainly the most challenging that we have prepared for your consideration in my 4 years at the helm of FSSA. But we used some guiding principles when we made this budget. There were certainly easier ways that we could have done this, but we decided that hard was better. And here are the biennium budget submission guiding principles that I asked our team to go by as we put this budget together for your consideration. The first is preserving member services. During this time of crisis, we want to make sure that members receive everything that they can to support their healing from this journey as we move into recovery, hopefully with the light at the end of the tunnel beginning yesterday in the state. We also looked under every rock we could find to reduce administrative burden to make sure that we were using our funding as effectively and efficiently as possible. We also wanted to build in long-term efficiencies. Though we did do some one-time budget cuts over the summer, we wanted to, in this budget submission, build in some long-term efficiencies that would help maintain this over time. And then looking for every possibility for aligning and partnering across agencies so that we could find efficiencies not only for ourselves, but also for our sister agencies as well. As you know, the Medicaid forecast will be presented tomorrow, and I know that you're looking forward to hearing from Allison Taylor, our Medicaid director, for that presentation tomorrow. Just as a quick reminder, our agency is large, and our total funding is $19.8 billion. We have $14.6 billion of that comes from the federal government. Much of that is for our large eligibility-based programs, TANF, SNAP, CCDF, and then of course Medicaid. 3.3 billion of that funding comes from the state budget, and 1.9 billion of that funding is what we call dedicated funding. And the largest examples of this include our tobacco settlement fund, tobacco tax, and then hospital assessment fees. Our appropriation request for this year, in year one, this is less Medicaid, of course, you'll hear about Medicaid tomorrow. For 2022, our current appropriation will have a reduction of $68,069,166. Our current appropriation is $791 million. We did base reductions of $77 million at the request for a 15% budget reduction. Some specific examples of how we went about doing this were decreases in our FSSA admin fund, our Medicaid admin fund, and our county admin fund for increased efficiencies across our spend. We also had a percentage reduction across all of our large contracts, and we specifically focused on how we could be more efficient with reductions to programs that impact the general fund. In 2023, we have a similar reduction. This is for year 2 of the biennium, with our current appropriation being 791 million, nearly 792, with a reduction of 77 million, and our reduction from our current appropriation being 69 million, with a new requested amount from fiscal year 23 of 722 million. We have 3 change packages to request that come in addition to the budget requests, and they are to maintain operations to meet those stated needs and principles for maintaining services for Hoosiers. The first is an increase in the Children's Health Insurance Program appropriation of 9.3 million in 2022, 7.8 million in 2023. These are anticipated changes that have been ongoing as the federal share for CHIP continues to decrease over time. That is a projected decrease that we budget in, and so this is the increase in the state share for that federal cost sharing partnership for children across Indiana. We also, as we have incorporated Indiana 211 fully into FSSA, we are requesting an increase in the Indiana 211 appropriation of $263,200 to cover the 211 cost and fully fund that program, as it has now become essential to our operations. And then finally, an adjustment to the state psychiatric hospitals funding to align the mental health funding to our forecasted revenue. The state psychiatric hospital network has increased in its delivery capacity with an increased number of individuals requiring incompetent to stand trial evaluations within the 6 hospital network. That is a request of a 13.9 million increase in 2022 and a 13.3 million increase in 2023. And with that, that is the completion of my formal presentation. I'm hoping to leave full allocation of time for questions that you may have. Here is our contact information. If you have further questions from today, we certainly are willing and available 24/7, 365 to answer your questions. Myself, our legislative director, Gus Habig, and then of course our website where you can put questions as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that anyone in the audience can ask questions of any of us as we move forward. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here with you today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sullivan. During the COVID pandemic, there have been less nursing home admissions. Why and where are these people going? What kind of care are they getting?
That's a fantastic question. That actually has been by design, Mr. Chairman. We have been supporting individuals to receive home and community-based services in this space through our aging and disabled waiver. We actually have a approved novel Appendix K, which allows for expedited eligibility for home and community-based services to be delivered for individuals who meet level of care to be admitted to a nursing facility to instead be served at home. So those folks are receiving home health, receiving A&D waiver HCBS services currently. We hope to continue this program post-pandemic. We have found that it has been very popular among Hoosiers themselves, and then also with our AAA partners, our assisted living partners, and then adult day program partners who are in this pilot process with us.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks very much for the presentation. A couple questions. You're asking for an additional $500,000, is that correct, over the 2-year biennium for 211?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, does the 211 currently now participate in the OB Navigator program?
211 has in the past been a partner with the Department of Health for the Navigator program, but that contract was completed and the Department of Health assumed the entirety of the mom's helpline process over our transition period.
Okay, so now we have an additional call. Were they capable of maintaining And
Yes,
keeping that
we
information?
absorbed that program within the existing team.
Okay, and so again, with the unemployment numbers that we heard yesterday and understanding that we've reduced the wait time, but many of the call takers are not adjudicators anyway, which I'm sure is appropriate, but is 211 capable of handling those calls?
That would be a process that we would consider for the future as we increase efficiencies across our entire agency network. What we're working on diligently with our new leadership team currently is making sure that 211 is knocking its current mission out of the park, which is answering the phone for people who need social services today. If we have the opportunity to further align with the Moms Helpline and the Department of Health in the future, we are absolutely committed to considering that and doing it.
Well, I think I had concerns when the state took over this whole 211 process several years ago. And my concern is they should be the one-stop shop. And if, for example, an unemployment question can at least be answered or directed, and having had concerns in my own community that the OB Navigator program is referring residents seeking help in Allen County down to Columbus, Indiana, I would think it would be more appropriate if this 211 is something we're going to advertise as the first call to help, that they would be able to answer all these questions or at least put them in the right direction. And so I guess I'm a little concerned that we are having multiple call centers set up that may be continued to be maintained when 211 is the number that we're going to be advertising as, I call it, the first call to help.
If you could send me some clarifications, I think there may be a couple of different processes that you're referring to, but absolutely so we just took 211 in July and are working to make sure that the folks have everything that they need there with connecting people to energy assistance, home assistance, transportation. We have a mental health option for our Be Well crisis helpline that was stood up during the pandemic. And actually, so the OB Navigator and Moms Helpline is also in the process of rolling out. It's currently in 22 counties. And so the opportunities for this tool to be utilized in the future are really unlimited as we get it up and running and stabilized. January 1 is when we are officially fully transitioned from the 211 partnership into FSSA. And so I can't wait to work with multiple agencies to get this work done.
Okay, because when this was also rolled out initially, the promise would be that the data would be collected so we could see hotspots. Okay, good.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. So has there been any, I know last budget we made some increases with respect to First Steps. Are there any increases in this budget for services to providers for in-home services for those with disabilities, the residential programs?
There are not.
Okay. And then for the nursing homes, I see in your detailed packet that came with the slides, you are transitioning to payments online, but you're experiencing some difficulties with that. Is that something that you have to do in-house, or since we've had other agencies use IoT, is that something they can do?
Those processes are coming online.
But is that something that you...
Yes, we have the capacity to do that.
Okay. And then your rate methodology for looking at reimbursements for Medicaid has been paused. When will that come back online?
As that will come back online, we hope, for the next biennium. The rate methodology grid project is nearly complete. We were not able to implement that for this budget given the budget constraints around the coming forecast for the state.
So in other words, no changes to rates, reimbursement rates will happen until the next biennium?
Well, of course, that depends on the work that you all help us with, but in our budget submission, we did not increase any rates. We also, we're pleased, many other states have actually gone to decreasing rates, and we sought and worked really hard in this budget submission to not impact rates within Medicaid.
Okay, and my final question, this is, I hope, a small item, but I see that for durable medical equipment, you're realigning, we were paying over Medicare costs. Medicaid requires us, the Medicaid participants receive at Medicare rates, and so you have been paying above and you're going to align it to Medicare rates, is that correct?
That is correct. That is a requirement from the CARES Act from a few years ago, and we are finishing that alignment process.
Okay. So at some other point, you could give me the information on what the difference is in that. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for your work in the ER and your work at FSSA.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everyone's time and thoughtfulness.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we next call Mr. Bortner with the Department of Natural Resources. May come up and testify.
Retirement of longtime DNR Director Cam Clark. For the past 15 years, I've been blessed to serve as the Director of Indiana State Parks, so while I'm new to this role, I'm certainly not new to the Department of Natural Resources. I'm joined today by two of my Deputy Directors. Mike Smith, whom you all know, is the CFO of our department and operates our Administrative Bureau, and Chris Smith, who many of you have worked with when he served as our Legislative Liaison and is now the Director of our Regulatory Arm. We are honored to spend a few minutes with you today to talk about our proposed budget and give you the opportunity to get answers to any questions that you may have. So with that, let's get started. The Indiana Department of Natural Resources is comprised of 21 different divisions, each with its own piece of the overall mission of the agency. There are 3 bureaus and several standalone divisions within the DNR. The Landholding Bureau, led by longtime DNR leader John Davis, consists of 7 different divisions, 5 of which are landholding. Those divisions are state parks, forestry, fish and wildlife, outdoor recreation, nature preserves, engineering, and land acquisition. The second bureau is the Regulatory Bureau, which, as I mentioned earlier, is led by Chris Smith and consists of water, oil and gas, reclamation, entomology, historic preservation, and communications. The third bureau is the Administration Bureau, led by our CFO, Mike Smith, and that bureau consists of finance and payroll, MIS, accounting and purchasing, asset management, and human resources. Our standalone divisions are legal, legislation, and law enforcement. While not divisions of the Department of Natural Resources in the normal sense, we also work very closely with our partners heading up the hearings in Natural Resources Commission, as well as the Natural Resources Foundation. Now I would like to share with you what I've shared with my team as the areas that I want us to focus our time, talent, and treasure on in the months ahead. I know there will be many challenges along the way, but I believe if we get these 7 pillars, as I refer to them, right, then I believe we can fulfill our mission and meet the expectations of the citizens of this great state. Our first pillar is customer service. I believe this is our #1 priority. I led the Indiana State Park Agency for 15 years, and our success was due to the fact that we put our guests and their needs above all else. When you take care of people and help them create memories that last a lifetime, good things will happen. Now we will ensure DNR as a whole takes on a customer service business model. The second pillar is fiscal responsibility. I learned in my 20 years in the private sector that if you watch the pennies, the dollars tend to take care of themselves. And given the financial constraints we all face today, it's critical that we hit the targets we've set with regard to not only spending, but revenue production as well. The third pillar is communication. Both internal and external communication must be practiced at all levels of the DNR. Whether communicating with guests or partners or stakeholders or simply each other, transparency in all we do is paramount to gaining trust and success in our mission. The fourth pillar, succession planning and diversity. Our business model is built upon the public supporting us. State Parks alone is 80% self-funded. Today, when you drive around the DNR properties, you'll see full campgrounds, beaches, and other property amenities being utilized by Hoosiers and our guests. If you hunt or fish or enjoy the out-of-doors in one of the many manners we offer, you will likely notice that a larger number of the guests you see look like me. Statistics tell us that by the year 2040, if not before, the population of the state will look less like me than what it does today. If we don't make progress in diversifying our customer and employee base, that self-funded portion of what we operate with will be greatly reduced. So not only is it the right thing to do, it is indeed a matter of survival for our agency. In the past, we focused our recruitment efforts to the college campuses. If we continue to wait until age 22 to reach out, we've missed our opportunity. We need to be attracting folks to what we do while they are still in grade school. If we do this, we will have young people who are entering the workforce looking at us as a career option as well as shoring up our customer base. The fifth pillar is personal growth. Today, when a young person enters the outdoors field as a career option, they can go anywhere they want to. The world is a much smaller place than what it was just a few short years ago. If we're going to attract and retain the necessary skills to make us successful, we must continue to invest in our most valuable asset, our people. The sixth pillar, a flatter organization. The closer we can get decision-making within the DNR to our customer base, the easier it is to get input from our stakeholders and the public. Our goal is to reduce the steps it takes to get an answer to questions and empower our team at the lowest level possible to make decisions. The seventh and final pillar is enhance the DNR brand. When Hoosiers think of the DNR, we want those thoughts to be uplifting. In the Indiana State Park System, when you call us on the phone, you are greeted with the term, making memories naturally. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the memory-making business. It's what we do. We have the perfect product, and it's up to us to ensure the name is synonymous with quality experiences and opportunities for all Hoosiers to explore and enjoy what is their birthright, the natural and cultural resources of the great state of Indiana. Now I would like to turn our attention to some of the accomplishments we've seen in fiscal year 20 and 21. While the pandemic has created challenges in our operation that we never could have dreamed of, it also reminded Hoosiers what is right at their fingertips. These treasures in our own backyard, as we refer to the DNR properties, have seen a new level of visitation. Now, we've seen this before. We saw it right after 9/11. When people look for normalcy in their lives, when that opportunity to get back to some sense of the way life should be, they turn to the outdoors to fill that need. While other park systems around the nation closed in response to the pandemic, we never did. We curtailed our operations, but we never told Hoosiers not to come outside and stretch your legs. We ask that you do it safely and follow our instructions, but we are open for business. If you look at our revenue figures through November of this fiscal year, you will see that we've been very successful with that part of the business. And bear in mind, we didn't charge gate fees until we reopened the campgrounds at the end of May 2020. The Governor's Next Level Trails program managed to complete round one before things really began to get off track with the pandemic. 17 trail grants totaling $24.7 million were awarded with local matching figures at $12.5 million. This was a commitment to create 42 miles of trails as part of this first round, and we were able to complete approximately 9 miles of trail now open for Hoosiers. While we had to prudently hit pause on the Next Level Trails program for now, round two is in the works and is ready once the program resumes. As part of the Governor's commitment to enhance and protect these special places, the DNR received a $30 million allocation in September of 2019 to concentrate on some of our biggest infrastructure issues. 54 rooms at Abe Martin Lodge in Brown County are being completely renovated, and over 70 restroom facilities are being installed to replace outdated units. We're also making some much-needed improvements in our wastewater treatment facilities as part of the project. Each district within our law enforcement division has a K-9 unit assigned to it. These K-9s are trained in tracking, wildlife detection, and searches. The units are an integral part of our law enforcement operation, and we had the opportunity to train units from Kansas, Oregon, Utah, and Virginia this year on the use of K-9 officers. When you're doing things right, other people want to learn from you, so we're excited about those opportunities. Lastly, before we go over our financial plans, the governor in August announced 2 new state forests to add to our landholding offerings. The first, Ravinia State Forest near Paragon, is a 1,500-acre tract of forest, and the second, Mount T State Forest near Nashville, is an 1,150-acre tract. These new state forests will serve as 2 locations for the governor's Million Tree Program, an initiative to plant 1 million new trees by the year 2025. I'm now going to ask my CFO, Mike Smith, to go over the details of our fiscal year 22 and 23 budget requests. Thank you for your time. Mike?
Thank you, Director Bortner. I will briefly summarize our 22-23 budget request. DNR's fiscal year 22-23 budget request follows the state budget agency's budget development guidelines. Our general fund base number is 85% of our FY21 general fund appropriation, resulting in an approximate reduction of $7.4 million. Our budget submission is based upon the premise of having access to our dedicated funds at approximately the FY20 revenue levels. Having this access minimizes the impact of the general fund reduction significantly. Our budget request for FY22 and 23 is about $1.1 million higher than our base. The 22-23 budget includes an additional $650,000 of general fund dollars per year to fund a conservation officer recruit school whose goal would be to graduate 10 new conservation officers. We currently have 34 officer vacancies out of a staff of 215, with an additional 6 resignations or retirements that will occur by July 1st of 2021. Our budget request also includes an approximate $500,000 increase in our OPEB contribution each year that relates to our retirement health care plan for our law enforcement officers. This contribution is calculated by an actuarial firm. Overall, we feel very confident that our budget request will allow us to maintain a solid customer base to respond to ever-increasing visitation statewide for the next 2 years. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. Questions? Senator Mishler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to congratulate Director Bortner. In my early years, I chaired natural resources, so I had the opportunity to work with all these folks, and I think I learned more about the budget in those years when I served as chair of natural resources, and I was always most amazed at how profitable you could be in your hotel operations. You know, we hear our government's not efficient, and that's what amazed me the most is how you were so successful in the hotel business there, in the lodges. And now I'll go back to your education piece. So I look at Chris Smith, as a youngster, worked at these parks and worked his way up. And I remember when I was a kid, you guys sponsored events in school, the hunting and fishing, the snowmobile safety, the boating safety, where you could get your boating license at 14. And then in a county of over 100 lakes, you know, it was always important to us. So when you talk about reaching out to students, like my son never had those programs. So my question is, do you still do that? Do those programs in the schools?
Yeah, things had changed over the years, and I'd seen that when I'd gotten to parks. You know, we had gotten into a habit of when things slowed down during the recreation season, we would hole ourselves up in the nature centers and other things, trying to fix things and put programming together for the next years. We made changes to that in state parks. Now we go to the schools. We get out and we do those things. Obviously, we can't do that right now, but that is the goal. As we said before, if we don't reach Hoosier children, by the time they're 13, they're no longer interested in what we do. We've got to make sure that we're making those contacts. And, you referred to the lodging system. When I first got here 15 years ago, I can distinctly remember one of my senior folks saying, "You can't run this like a business because we don't make a product." You heard me say earlier, we're in the memory making business. There's a certain location in Orlando and a mouse that did a real good job and is financially viable in the memory making business. We do the same thing, and I think our product is much better than what they have to offer. We just have to make sure that we're operating things on business principles. Every nickel that comes into the DNR system goes right back into the DNR system. So, while we're not reporting to a group of shareholders or a board of directors, we're reporting to the great state of Indiana and Hoosiers. As I said, these properties and these special places, the natural and cultural resources of this state belong to Hoosiers. We are here to take care of those, but we certainly have to reinvest in those.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director Bortner. I'm also glad that you're in this new position, reading about your background in parks and experiencing the great work in the parks.
Thank you.
And then also just watching your presentation, I feel bullish about the agency, so thank you.
Appreciate that.
First, I want to share that I've been an outdoors person my whole adult life, but I first fell in love with the outdoors in McCormick's Creek State Park when I was 11 or 12. So you probably know that back in March, a Trails Caucus was launched. Maybe not. Myself, Senator Melton, Senator Cruz, Representative Tony Cook, the four of us, bicameral, bipartisan, launched the Indiana Legislative Trails Caucus. We have growing membership, I think about 30 members now, very much bipartisan, almost equally divided, I think. And we've discovered in just a few meetings over the summer and other conversations, very, very, very strong support in all sorts of communities, rural, urban, small, large, all over, every part of the state. And I know you know this. I'm glad to reiterate, very, very strong demand for all sorts of trails.
Yes.
So I was excited to hear that you say there's a conversation about the next round of next level trails. And I'm hoping you can expand a little bit on that, how much and when, and also if we're going to be able to spend all of the money that was originally allocated and what timeline. And then finally, and then I won't have words after probably, I love making memories naturally, just love that.
Well, thank you for those comments. I learned from the guy that hired me into state government. One comment that Governor Daniels always made is that if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. So when I was running parks, we asked our guests constantly, what is it about this that you like? What don't you like? Well, in 2016, for our 100th anniversary and trying to plan for the next 100 years, we did an extensive job of trying to get input from our user groups. And we had 17,000 responses to the questions that we answered. And what we found is the number one recreational activity in what we do is trail usage. Because, once you come into the park, that's the end of that cost. You can go out and 9 months out of the year, we don't run gates anyway. And so you can come out and you and your family can hike, and it doesn't cost additional things to do that. You can have mobility issues, and you can still come out and do those types of things depending on the level of the trail. So we know that trails are the number one thing that people want to do, so therefore we need to invest in those to ensure that those things are there. And I'm still learning a lot about the Next Level Trails program and things. I know the governor is very adamant about picking this back up when the opportunity to do so is there, and we will be ready. Our Division of Outdoor Recreation is constantly keeping things in order, ready to go as soon as the opportunity arises. So, like I said, the numbers dictate that that's what we need to be paying attention to, and we will do.
All right. Well, I can assure you the Trails Caucus will continue to work to get that money in your hands as soon as possible.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Senator Brown?
Thank you very much. And yes, great job. It's particularly amazing, one of the best revenue years and a welcome oasis in this whole
Thank you,
COVID
Senator.
pandemic time. Quick question. Yeah, my question was the next level trails money. Has it all been spent? I know there's a 20% match. Was the 70 million already all spent?
We spent the first round of it.
Okay.
And there's, there were several rounds to come, and there has been obviously a pause in both next level trails and in the deferred maintenance component that we were working with. We fully anticipate that we will move forward with those at some point in time, but we just don't know when that's going to be.
So how much has been spent to date, do you know?
Do you know how much we've put
Yes,
into that?
approximately 25 million of the $100 million. Round two was set to be an award amount of 30 million. So that's where we're at with that.
And these trails, when they're all local trails? No, they're not. They're all, but when they're local, the locals are responsible for maintenance then going forward.
That's correct.
Right. All right, and then just a quick question on the underground injection control. Could you just explain under your oil and gas responsibilities, you regulate underground injection control. What is that?
Wow, I'm going to have to follow up with that one,
Okay.
Senator. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Smith might be able to answer some of that
There we
for
go.
us.
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. So we do regulate and permit oil and gas well operation throughout the state. When operators withdraw their oil from the underground, it comes with a certain amount of water in it. So they go through a process of separating it. And then what they do is they push that water back down underground. So that's the injection they're referencing right there.
And that's what you're regulating, just the water that's...
We regulate the oil and gas from the time they permit the well until the time that well's useful life is closed out, and they plug that well to make sure that no surface water infiltrates that old hole. So we're from permitting to the end of the life of that well.
So is that underground injection control only over oil and gas, nothing else that's injected or underground?
So our specific jurisdiction is focused on only oil and gas operators.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Fatty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, thank you for your service, especially during these difficult times too, and your
Thanks, sir.
staff. I understand that IDEM has also a responsibility when it comes to the quality of air and water, and they're not on the agenda today. But I have two quick questions. First, from your perspective, how do we rank in terms of the quality of water and air in Indiana? And is there a strategic joint initiative between IDEM and DNR to respond to any strategic threat to the future of quality of water and air, especially its impact on rural and urban and suburban areas?
Certainly. And I'll ask Chris to respond to that. But, the first comment, one of the things that my knowledge base, one of the first things I had to really dig into to learn was that regulatory arm of the business, because I was so used to it in the operational end of things. And the thing that helps me to remember is that IDEM is responsible for the quality of water. We're responsible for the movement of water. Chris, can you answer some of that?
Sure, absolutely. Senator, as the director mentioned, our role in water is more quantity related. So we look at movement of water through the floodway and construction of infrastructure in that area to help ensure that water keeps moving as it should and doesn't back up and cause damage. The other thing we look at is availability of water for consumption. So we are registering all domestic well users, be it just personal homes or larger municipalities who have wells in that serve as their public water service. We do oftentimes talk to our partners over at IDEM. It's easy to confuse who's doing what, especially when it comes to the permitting piece. This last year, we spent a good deal of time working together and working with our constituencies to simplify that process, because oftentimes there are permits you need from both agencies. So starting about January last year, one of the very first things we did was bring in our customer bases, put them together and ask them the questions of, where are your pain points when applying with both agencies or individual agencies? So we walked through that, figured out what our problem areas were, sat down with a facilitator, walk through each of our permitting processes, try to gain as much of efficiency as we can. The result of that is the Waterways portal that you can find on both agencies' websites. So you can come in, you can put your project on the map, tell us a little bit about what it is you want to do. That shoots out to both agencies. We give you a single response back on behalf of both agencies telling you exactly what permits you need, whether it's one, the other, either, or neither. And then we provide you a one application that's used for both agencies. So we've tried to slim that down as much as possible. But as far as the water quality pieces, I'm unfortunately going to have to refer you to IDEM to talk on that matter.
Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director, for being here today, along with the Smith brothers. You talked about in your 7 pillars.
Yes.
And the pillar in the middle, of course, was succession planning and diversity. Do you happen to know the demographics of your employees currently?
I don't know the exact figures from an HR standpoint, but I can see, and we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do. When I first came on board as the Parks Director, we had one African-American gentleman that was a property manager. He was so good at that, we promoted him to engineering. So I now have no property managers that are African-American or people of color. We have work to do. And as I said before, not only is it the right thing to do, for us, it's going to be a matter of financial survival. If people don't become in love with what we do, as those demographics and the population changes, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And we can't wait until that pain starts to start doing something about it.
And I totally agree with you, because there, quite frankly, there are stereotypes in regards to the DNR personnel.
Certainly.
And that's reality. And in light of that, and Mr. Smith did talk about recruiting, is there a strategic plan on recruiting and retention of those 10 new officers that you're going to have, or the ones that are retiring, and how to create a pipeline of diversity within DNR? And you did mention about not getting people in college, but looking at the lower level. So yeah. Is there a plan or anything that's going to particularly, I know since we got the caucus over here, I'm quite sure that caucus will be able to take up that mantle for you in regards
and we would love to have some of those discussions. Obviously, we're going to work with the new state personnel director over there and start talking about some of these things as far as what that looks like on paper. But where it's really going to make the difference is for us getting those young people out to the properties, and for those young people to see that this is a safe place to be, it's a fun place to be. I've never seen a child, once you got them outside, that didn't have a great time. But we've got to be able to make it a comfortable situation for them to be outside. And that's going to have to be worked outside of the human resource field. It's got to be our people, our interpreters. I refer to them as our storytellers, and if I asked around the room here what your favorite park was by person, you would tell me that the one that you grew up next to is your favorite park in the whole system, because that's where the memories were created. My father was a photographer, a freelance photographer, and he did a lot of work for our magazine, Outdoor Indiana magazine. So growing up, every weekend, we didn't go to Kings Island or Disney World. We went to an Indiana State Park property, and I certainly wouldn't advocate this, but at 8 o'clock in the morning, he'd say, "You boys be back at the car at 5." And we didn't fear anything. That's what we have to fix. We've got to be able to get people outside, and we got to make sure that they're comfortable being there, and we have to provide that access for them. So we do have a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much for your vision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Jackson.
There he is. Yeah, thanks. I just want to stress again how this year, despite all of the challenges from COVID-19, what a remarkable year it was for parks and
certainly
and parks revenue. I mean, given that, remind me, how long was camping down at the beginning of the season?
We didn't open our campground until Memorial Day, and traditionally we start seeing our first campers of the season in March.
So despite kind of being closed, for almost a quarter there, I know we usually look at revenue in terms of a state fiscal year, but we still had just a stellar year in terms of occupancy as well as revenue for parks over this
Right.
calendar
And
year.
we know through historic trends, what each weekend of that recreation season looks like. And this one was an anomaly in that, we had Memorial Day weekend, which was full and everybody was there. Every weekend until the second weekend in November was Memorial Day weekend. We were at 95% full every single weekend. And as I said earlier, that once we get some people outside, they come back and they continue. We are already full for Memorial Day 2021. If you haven't got your reservation and we're going to take care of you, son. If you don't have your reservation, you're likely not going to get a site. So we expect that things will be just as crazy going forward. And like I said, I use the term, loosely in that this is a good thing, but we have to be prepared for that. We've got to have things ready to go as soon as the weather breaks, because we were 60% full the second weekend in November. Historically, after the last weekend in October, we don't see people. They kept going until the weather got bad. So I've got a hunch that as soon as it breaks, they're coming back. We sell holiday gift packs, which, by the way, we'd love to sell each one of you one. That includes an annual pass with that. At last count, Smitty, do you remember how many were up in the sales of the annual gift pack?
I think we've tripled since last year.
And so they're coming back, and we've got to be ready. And this, like I said, this is a good thing, but we have to change how we approach the business and be ready earlier.
And I'll just say, congratulations again on such a great year. Thanks for hosting me and my kids over 20 nights this year. I paid, just for the group, I paid for my own reservations, but got to know at least probably a dozen or so property managers, assistant managers, and what a great year.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Hamilton, another question?
Yeah, thank you. Just one follow-up question. I'm hoping you or maybe one of the Smiths might answer, and that is back to the Next Level Trails program. Do you know, so if you're planning to have the next round, you don't know all the details, but can you say if the folks, as you know, folks in communities all over were hoping to receive a good news back in May, right? Would those applicants have to reapply?
I don't believe so. I think they're still in the queue. They're shelf ready.
Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further question? Senator Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Senator.
With the Indiana Dunes National Park being a federal, receiving its federal designation, do you all partner and collaborate on things?
Absolutely.
And if so,
we talk, Paul and our folks talk all the time. Prior to stepping into this role, I was the president of the National Association of State Park Directors, and the collaboration between state parks all across the country and our federal partners, we all talk all the time. Here in Indiana, we have 3 federal properties. We have the new national park at Indiana Dunes, but we also have the George Rogers Clark Memorial at Vincennes and the Lincoln Boyhood National Memorial down in Spencer County, which is right across the street from Lincoln State Park. Thomas Lincoln's farm, we've kind of split they took part of it, we took part of it. So, we're joined at the hip with them. We talk all the time. If they ever get a National Park Service director, those communications will be there. I still keep in contact with John Jarvis, the former Parks Director, and some of the folks that have been in those roles. We talk a lot.
if there are municipalities or entities that have land that is no longer used for recreational purposes, do you guys ever partner with them to either acquire that land and, get that land donated? And so what's that process?
Sure. We are always interested in bringing additional land into the public domain. The one area that I always try to caution folks on, because anytime that new land is brought in, a lot of folks say, well, let's make this a state park. And I hesitate, the original goal in 1916 that Colonel Lieber had was to have a state park within an hour's drive of every Hoosier. When we took Prophetstown in 2004, that goal has been accomplished. So the idea of additional state parks, when you say the term park means infrastructure. When people come to a park, they expect to see roads and bathrooms and campgrounds and swimming pools and things of this nature. We can put land into the public domain for public use and preservation without making it a park. It can be a forestry property where you can hunt and fish and things like that. It can be fish and wildlife. It can be nature preserve. It can be outdoor rec. We can certainly bring it into the public domain for preservation purposes and public use. Not to say that we won't ever have another state park where it makes sense to do so, but the idea is to just bring it in so folks can take care of it and utilize it.
Here's why I bring that up, and Senator Mishler had me reminiscing as a kid. In the Gary School Corporation, we used to have a parks system within the school corporation where they teach you how to boat, swim. There were cabins on the property. When programs like that kind of go away, you have more children, especially in minority communities, that are not learning how to swim, more prone to drownings, especially on Lake Michigan, which is a deadly lake when it comes down to swimming.
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of bring that back up. That made me think about what we used to have, and how Representative Porter mentioned, there's a stigma in terms of certain communities not being as engaged with nature. That's one of the reasons why I appreciate the Trail Caucus. So, so good job on everything you're doing. I think there's opportunities to partner, collaborate. Don't hesitate to reach out, to those in our district so we can give you some thoughts and some suggestions.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that. And we do need to get a little bit better at working with those local park systems. We have good relationships in the larger ones, but when you start looking at the smaller communities and things, sometimes it's not there as much as it should be. So, yeah, there's work to be done there as well.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for your hard work you do. Thank you. Mr. Rob Carter, as soon as the area is cleansed here. Mr. Rob Carter, appreciate your coming.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Good morning. Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget Committee, Rob Carter, Department of Corrections, and with me I have my Deputy Commissioner of Finance, Christina Riegel. Pushing the right button, there we go. Our mission statement, our vision statement are based off of Article 1, Section 18 of the Indiana Constitution, which is pretty unique. It says that the penal code shall be founded on the principles of reformation and not vindictive justice. I don't have a habit of looking at other state constitutions, but I'm not aware of any that has that type of language in there about related to corrections, so it's pretty strong language. Since they can't all be here, I wanted to introduce you real quickly to my senior team. Randy Custer is my Chief of Staff. Christine Blessinger is Deputy Commissioner of Reentry and Youth Services. Angela Sutton is Deputy Commissioner of Diversity, Training, and Development. Dr. Kristen Doss is my Chief Medical Officer. Jim Basinger is Deputy Commissioner of Operations. And Christina Riegel, I just introduced her. This is a snapshot of our adult facilities. We have facilities all over the state, as you can see, 15 adult male prisons around the state and 3 female prisons. We also have youth services. The juvenile prisons, we have 1 female prison in LaPorte County and 2 male facilities. One's in Logansport and the other one is in Pendleton. So we have 21 facilities total around the state. Pearl districts, there are 10 Pearl districts around the state of Indiana, and they supervise on an average of 5,500 offenders on any given day. This will give you an idea of where our population has gone over the past few years. Population trending is kind of hard to predict, especially right now because things are really crazy with COVID. In any event, you can see that for a while we had probably the fastest growing population in the nation of offenders, and it was steadily rising, and it was predicted to eclipse and be overcrowded in around 2013, 2015 during that time. During that time, there was also an effort by the General Assembly for criminal justice reform, HEA 1006. There were a lot of changes that were made. I was not working in state government at the time, but there's a lot of good things that happened with House Bill 1006, HEA 1006. It established that felony, they used to be called D felons, but they call them level 6 felons now, they used to be housed at the Department of Correction. They are now housed at the county level, and our population did drop. It dropped pretty dramatically during that time. As you can see, though, over the past couple years, the population started to creep back up. We were getting close to roughly 27,000 offenders until COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and I think justice has been delayed for a while because we're just not getting the offenders that we had before. They're just not coming in. The court systems have been shut down in a lot of places. So we really don't know how to predict our population going forward. It's going to be a challenge. A lot of counties have done a lot of things with sentence modifications, and but we still, it's really hard to predict. This will give you an idea of the distribution of county community corrections populations. Unfortunately, this slide is calendar year 2019. 2020 data is currently being compiled, so we don't have that information yet, but I think our 2020 data is going to show a lot of diversions from jail, a lot of pretrial offenders that are going to community corrections, and it's another effect of COVID. But we're working with trial court technology to get that information. This is a map showing our community corrections agencies throughout the state. Every county is covered except for 3 with community corrections. So their goal is basically, this is a local program. The state just provides grants, but we try to empower local criminal justice agencies to find alternatives to imprisonment, diversions from jail and intermediate sanctions, things like that. COVID impact. COVID really hit us hard. It hit me hard. It's hit everybody hard. I never contracted COVID, but it just really wore us out. We had a little break in the summer, and we enforced the mandatory mask wearing with our staff, and our numbers went down. It pretty much almost went away for a while. But this fall's come back, and to date, we've had 2,800 offenders with COVID, and 1,200 staff have tested positive. We've had over 43 deaths attributed to COVID, and that's staff and offenders included. So it's really been tough. This slide here will give you an idea of what we've had to do with COVID, some of the things that we've added and some of the things that we've had to reduce. Since early spring, about 80% of our time has been spent focusing on COVID issues and ways to prevent it and ways to prevent it from being introduced in our facilities, trying to reduce the spread in our prisons and our juvenile facilities. The first thing that we did when it hit us was we started making masks. We started making our own masks. We put our high-end sewing shops to use and started churning those out as quickly as we could. We were the first state that I know of, at least in the Midwest, to start making our own PPE. Unfortunately, we had to suspend visitation, volunteer services, followed by some work release programs and our work crews, and move swiftly to isolate offenders and quarantine all symptomatic incarcerated individuals, trying to keep it from spreading from different housing units. We expanded our PPE production also and started making masks, shields, gowns, sanitizer, hand sanitizer, soap for our population, implemented screening procedures for all of our staff, restricted certain areas, and we've got a technical response team. It's basically a hazmat team that we've had for a long time, but they really came into good use during this COVID epidemic. So we've had to relocate some offenders that were aging for a brief time, just for their own safety. We had our We Ones program where we have mothers that are raising, well, they're not raising their children, but their children were born inside the prison or at the hospital, but they're in prison. And we moved the moms and babies for a short time to a different location for their safety. And that was from the Indiana Women's Prison. It's interesting, this is the cold and flu season, but this year, knock on wood, we have had no cases of the flu. So I think all the efforts that we're taking has pretty much slowed our flu spread. We've had a lot of reentry successes over the past couple of years, even through this pandemic, but none has really impacted me personally than the story of these three ladies. Some of you may or may not know, but we do hire former offenders. And it's because I think it's hypocritical for me to expect Hoosier employers to hire people with felonies on their record and me not doing it myself. So the last mile computer coding program is something that the governor brought into the state in 2017. And it's having a profound impact, life-changing impact on incarcerated persons to learn high-tech, to get high-tech qualifications. And this unique program is life-altering, I can tell you. These three ladies were part of the very first cohort that we had at the Indiana Women's Prison. They graduated and they're full-stack computer engineers. After their release in late 2019, we had some openings in the department, and I reached out to them and offered them employment. The first one on the left is Celeste Howe. She was hired in February this year, and she's currently our DOC webmaster. And if you haven't seen her website lately, it looks really awesome. Melissa told me last week that she's reconnected with her child, who was in foster care while she was in prison. She paid cash for a Mustang GT. She has a checking and savings account, and she now chairs a committee for recovering addicts. She's doing really well. The lady in the middle is Jennifer Browning. She started in January this year. She is our program manager for all of our technical programs like the Last Mile. Not only does she help finding the right offenders for the coding program, she helps them upon release get back on their feet. Since working for us, Jen has paid her fines and fees off. She's built an investment portfolio, bought a new car, and she plans on buying her first house this year. The last one, Jennifer Fleming, She began working for us in February 2020. She started working in our tech division. While working there, she was noticed by one of our vendors. She was quickly hired by KHI Solutions, and she's currently making a 6-digit salary. She recently told me she's bought a new car. She is saving money to buy a new home. She meets regularly with a financial advisor, and she's paid off 4 years worth of court fees in 9 months. And best of all, she just got accepted into grad school. These 3 formerly incarcerated ladies are now business professionals, and I couldn't be prouder. I learned a lot while working with these ladies because they all face huge barriers upon release. I found myself personally calling judges and probation officers, explaining their situation, asking for help with their transfers, and the courts were very helpful. But I can't imagine them being able to succeed the way they have without our team helping. So this has led us to take a deeper dive into pre-release barriers that we have. I no longer assume now that I've done all I can do to prepare offenders for their release. I still have a lot to do. That's the main part of my presentation. The next slide is talking about our finance part. I'm going to turn that over to Christina. Oops.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a brief summary of our budget. In this current fiscal year, we are appropriated general fund dollars of $635 million. Recommended budget for fiscal year 22 is $657 million, and in 23, $661 million. Some highlights of what that budget will help us accomplish. Obviously, continuing to prepare offenders for reentry opportunities, like Commissioner talked about. He is right, we have a lot of work to do. We've done a lot of great work recently, but there's always more that we can do. A big part of this will go to hepatitis C treatment for more than 3,000 incarcerated adults. We are currently in an agreement on a case, and in this current biennium, we have treated those individuals who are considered class 1 and class 2 individuals, which means that they were furthest progressed in their disease. In the new biennium, we'll be moving to class 3 and class 4 individuals who are more stable and who we had time to be able to operationally and fiscally be able to manage their treatment. We also have been able to do pay plan adjustments for correctional professionals working directly with the offender population. This has had a huge impact on the level of candidate that we're able to recruit. We have trouble maintaining and retaining staff in the Department of Correction. It's a very difficult environment to work in. And this pay plan adjustment is certainly helping us make strides on hiring more qualified candidates and then those who are looking to make corrections their career. And then a final note of just something that might kind of look a little different. We have established a new correctional services fund. In the past, we had separate funds for a lot of our major services, so medical, education, and food services. We've combined those into one. Those contracts are actually expiring during this biennium. And combining those into one fund is going to allow us some flexibility on making sure that we're going out to RFP and we're getting the services that we need and that we're targeting the right kind of services. That is all that I have, and so we'll open up to questions.
Questions? Senator Mishler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I mentioned my wonderful years chairing natural resources, and that's when my longtime friendship began with Mr. Carter here. So I know it's a tough spot to be in this position, so thank you for doing it. I have 2 questions. You said due to COVID, there's alternative measures are being taken other than going to jail. Are any of those working?
I think so. There are, I don't know whether the Supreme Court talked about Trial Rule 26, which uses a risk assessment to help counties decide who needs to be in jail and who can be released. That's been helpful in the jail population. I think judges have taken a hard look on sentences, and they've also made some sentence modification. They've released some of our offenders early. The offenders or the offender families have petitioned to the courts. So it's having an impact. The population statewide in jails and prison is down right now currently. That's a good thing. That's savings for the taxpayer mainly, but it's also a safety and big safety consideration. So yeah, it's having an impact, but to where it goes, I don't know. You know, will we have less population or prisons in our jails? I hope so. But, you know, we just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, my point is, if some of these things are working that we're doing during COVID, you know, it might be beneficial to carry on some of these programs after COVID.
Right. There are a lot of things that are working. There haven't been many jury trials. I'm concerned about that we're going to have a stacking effect, and the floodgates are going to open, and we're going to have a bunch of offenders coming our way. So that's why I said it's so hard to predict who's coming our way and who's not.
Second question is the $1 million question. I know you're tired of answering every time, but I'm asked all the time, so I need to have an answer. But, you know, with the population going down, you know, you would think the expenses would go down. So can you explain, with that being said, why your expenses are going up?
I'm going to defer to.
Sure, yep. So with our population going down, up until COVID, those offenders were being diverted to, a lot of times, to county jails. So we are, even though the F6s got diverted to county jails, we were responsible for reimbursing the sheriffs that per diem. So we saw a decline in our population, but an increase in the county jail population. As we paid the per diem to the county jails, it basically just shifted where those expenses were. We did have some savings overall. Obviously, our food and medical services are per diem based, so we had some savings there. A lot of those savings were reinvested into some of the reentry services that we provide. But I would say the majority is really from the just the shift in where those individuals were housed.
You're saying, so the population, the DOC is going down, but locals are going up. But maybe I'm misunderstanding your diagram here. But the one I'm looking at with the red line says it includes those in the local jails.
Okay, yep.
But it still shows a declining number total.
Sure, so those are our offenders that are housed in the local county jail. So sometimes, even though they're sentenced to DOC, they are held at the county jail level. We are also responsible for reimbursement for those. So they're the F6 diversions, and then our offenders that are held in the county jail. That graph only includes our offenders who are sentenced to the Department of Correction, not the F6 offenders.
Thank you.
And I'm hopeful that that number stays low, but I just see it. I think it's going to creep back up. I just think justice is being delayed right now because of COVID.
Senator Faddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your service during these difficult times. A couple of budget questions. Looking at the agency operating account summary report, I've noticed that you zeroed out your reentry education facility fund, your medical services fund, your educational services fund, and you shifted these dollars to your general fund, and that's where we see the increase of $8 million. So I assume this gives you greater flexibility in terms of how to spend these dollars. Is that what the intention is behind that?
It absolutely is, yes.
Great. And the $8 million increase is where basically you're looking at the professional development and plus additional programs, correct?
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification. I think we can have these conversations during the actual appropriation committee hearings. The second point, in terms of the per diem for counties, I remember House Bill 1006 gave about $35, and a couple of years ago it went up a little bit. My understanding is that the average per diem across the state hovers anywhere between $50 to $85 a day. Is part of your plan for asking the General Assembly to increase that per diem for the next few years to help local county jails?
So that's a $1 million question. And I will try to stay high level with it. We can get in a little deeper in appropriation. So our per diem across the board is around $55 a day. That includes all of our overhead expenses. So 80% of our budget in the facilities actually goes to personnel services. For me, to add 5 offenders to a housing unit, none of those overhead expenses really change. So when I'm looking at increasing my population, it's specific to the per diem based items. So I think that when we look at a comparison of the $55 versus the $35, I'm not sure that it's apples to apples, but I think there's still some work to do to really determine what the right number is.
Absolutely, and I think we, working collaboratively between the state level and the local level is extremely helpful because there's a downstream impact from legislation and appropriation at the state level to the county level. My final and concluding point, I want to thank you for your continued investment in community corrections and supporting local community corrections. From previous experience working with local cities and counties, I know that this investment has heavy return investment for the taxpayers. When you pay, when a local community corrections pays anywhere between $0 to $15 to place someone on, local probation through our work release program, is different than paying $55 or $85 a day for keeping someone in jail. So these dollars actually yield savings for our taxpayers on a daily basis. I'd appreciate your leadership and your collaboration with counties to ensure that that continues. Thank you for your service.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to clarify the per diem, and you were saying, I'm not sure I understood, in COVID you have kept, I shouldn't say refused, but kept some potential DOC prisoners in local jails? Is that what you were suggesting, out of the normal?
Yeah, those that have been sentenced because our intake unit was getting infected at RDC in Plainfield. That's where we have our intake for adult males. We had a big infection from the county jail, so we asked sheriffs to slow it down. And during that time, we had to pay them to house our offender that was sentenced to us. And, we still have a backlog, but it's getting better every day. But, it was becoming hard to manage. We only had one intake unit. We've actually had to expand our intake to the Miami Correctional Facility just to keep from having a big backlog. Because again, I think that, we're going to get a flood of offenders eventually.
I am concerned about that too, but with respect to this, so you're suggesting that the jails started the outbreak and sent it to? No, but they don't have a choice in that, and so you're paying for those, to keep them, I mean, when you refuse them, but we know there could also be some outbreaks then in the jail, so are you still paying at the same per diem rate for this type of population that you've been paying?
We are still paying the same per diem. So we haven't necessarily, it isn't a matter of refusing. We have slowed our intake to be able to cohort and make sure that we're keeping folks together. So, but we do take even symptomatic individuals from a county. They can come to our intake units.
Yeah, and we have.
I'm sorry, but my concern. I mean, you're just pushing the problem down. If you don't want COVID prisoners, I mean, someone's got to take them, right? So.
Yeah, we haven't refused to take them. We just asked. I was a sheriff, so I know. I talk to these guys every day. I was twice elected. I had a small jail. It was a rough job, and I know what they're going through. So we just ask that they slow down intake. But if they have to get rid of their offenders, if they're overcrowded now and they're in trouble, we'll take them, no matter what they test, whether they're symptomatic or not, we'll take them in. So we just ask that they slow it down.
All right, thanks. 2 quick questions. You mentioned the flu, and I'm curious if they get the flu shots, if that's made available. And more importantly, with the hepatitis C, which is a significant cost for the care, if they come to you they're already hep C positive and are receiving treatment, is there a different reimbursement rate, if you will, as opposed to them becoming hep C within? In other words, is there a pool of funds, Medicaid or something that you can tap into going forward?
Yeah, I'll take the flu shot thing. We set a record this year. We had over 70% of our offenders accept and take the flu shot, which is great. That's the best news that I had for a long time. And, you know, like I said, knock on wood, we haven't seen it yet that we know of in our facility. But the Hep C question?
Sure, yeah, so the Hep C question, we cannot pull from Medicaid dollars. Our offenders are not eligible for Medicaid as soon as they come into our doors. So even if they were on treatment on the outside, Medicaid was picking it up. Once they come to us, it becomes the responsibility of the agency. We have worked really hard to get some lower rates. We've actually established 340B pricing. We partnered with the Indiana State Department of Health to establish that 340B pricing. And then, of course, the cost of treatment is coming down just naturally as more drugs come on the market. So back in 2017, treatment was $73,000 an individual. It's stepped down throughout the years, and now that we've secured that 340B pricing, we're just over $14,000 per treatment.
Okay, isn't there a concern that that 340B is going to go away in the
We have heard some of that. So on top of establishing the 340B pricing, we've also partnered with some suppliers. And even prior to establishing 340B pricing, we had some agreements that had pricing down to about $15,500.
Thank you.
Senator Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions going back to management of the COVID pandemic within the facilities. Several states that I'm aware of have been exercising compassionate release in terms of individuals that may have underlying health conditions, nonviolent offenders, or, you know, their age and things like that. Have we exercised that at all?
That's between the local prosecutor and judge. So there have been some modifications, like I mentioned before. But as far as on a state level, that's beyond my authority to do. So, but there have been, and you know, it's a local decision. The court that sentenced that offender, then they're going to have to petition to that court.
Okay. Going to the reentry aspect of things, I was just curious in terms of what does that program look like as folks are reentering back into society? And the reason why I ask, I've seen individuals that come out that may not have the necessary identification. You know, they're curious on how to receive health care services. Is there a process in place to help folks get the basics when they transition back into society?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head, because we have done a pretty good job, I think, with adult basic education. We get offenders trained up with certificates. The one thing we never ask them that I know of is, how's their experience? I mean, were they ready to be released? Are they, you know, what has happened when they've got on the outside? One of the ladies that I mentioned earlier, she'd been in prison for 9 years. Things changed a lot, you know. She was very fragile. Christina worked with her. I worked with her. We made some calls for her on her behalf, but not everybody gets that, you know. I want to help everybody I can, but there's just not enough of us to go around. But yeah, we have totally, because of our experience that we've learned, and we're now regularly reaching out to our offender population and trying to find out what barriers that they have. Mainly, I mean, I met a guy that had $80,000 in child support. There are fines and court costs that, you know, they get out, they're not even thinking about that when they get out. So we are sitting down with them now, having financial management discussions with them. You know, how are you going to pay these fines off? How are you going to, you know, you need wills. You know, how are you going to get your license back? You have, some of them have unpaid traffic fines that date back years, you know. So those are the type of barriers that we never really thought about. It was right under our nose, you know. So, yeah. But I'm glad you asked that, because that's our challenge. And I want members of the General Assembly to talk to these ladies and talk to some of these former offenders too, you know, just to hear them, because they've got a story to tell and they like to talk, and they'll let you know where, you know, the roadblocks that they ran into. Luckily, I was able to help these, but you know, you wonder why they're coming back. They don't have any hope, you know.
From a low-hanging fruit perspective, I think if we can help folks at least have a state ID.
We give them, yeah, we provide that.
Okay, so we provide a state ID, at least those type of things, if they don't know what their social security card is or birth certificate, because a lot of the services and other programs, they're going to need those type of documents, so it'll be good to transition.
We're even going as far as, okay, you have an expired license, you've got a reinstatement fee, that's it, you know. We're working with these offenders trying to get their license back through just by paying a reinstatement fee.
And we do have, so the BMV actually comes on site to do state ID cards for releasing offenders. We also, every single offender that's released, a Medicaid application is submitted on their behalf. And then in their release packet and in their education for pre-release, then we advise them on how to, you know, make sure that's activated, where their local office is, and things like that.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Good morning and thanks. Probably questions more for Christina, but with regards to the county jail maintenance fund, I'm going to use kind of round numbers, but let's say 25 million of that is used for the F6 distribution, and another 5 million or so is used for the county jail holds, where as the commissioner was mentioning, you know, we're kind of waiting to pick up inmates. Do those reimbursements out of that include that 30 million? Does that include health care costs for COVID or other, or both situations? Are those paid for elsewhere and fully reimbursed to jails? That's kind of my first question.
Sure, yeah, so medical, all medical expenses they are not in that per diem. We cover medical expenses outside. So the locals will pay the invoices and then send the invoice to us for reimbursement, and they're reimbursed 100% for the medical invoices.
Okay, thanks. And then secondly, can you be just a little bit more specific on your last slide regarding kind of the pay increase that we've done for correctional officers? Could you give more dollars amounts and just kind of tell a little bit more of that success story, please?
I would love to. So the overall package was a $30 million package spread across our 21 facilities. It went to all ranks of custody, and then it also went to non-custody staff who have daily offender interaction. That was something that we were really passionate about. Just some initial I guess, feedback. So we averaged on a weekly basis across the state 50 to 100 applications. We're now averaging about 600 applications each week. At the time of the pay plan adjustments, we had 10 of our 21 facilities had vacancy rates that were greater than 19% due to that turnover issue that I discussed, and we're now sitting at only 4 of our 21 facilities are over that percentage. So it's had a huge impact on retention. We had individuals who had turned in their resignation who pulled that resignation and decided to stay due to the increase, and just an overall morale, and the information that we get back on that has been fantastic.
Thank you. Any further question? Senator Fatty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is more of, maybe it's a question, but also of a comment. And Commissioner, in your previous capacity as an elected sheriff, you probably have experienced some of this. Across the state of Indiana, many of the inmates struggle with substance use disorders, mental health, and addiction issues. And many of those individuals need a healthcare solution rather than correctional solution. I personally had the privilege of having a couple of tours with sheriffs in jail facilities where they actually, one day while I was in the facility, a gentleman who was about 45 years old, who had the intellectual capacity of a 5-year-old child, was banging his head against the wall, and he was bleeding to the point that they had to bring the intervention team. And I asked, what is the story? behind this case, and they said that that gentleman has developmental disability issues, mental health issues, and his family was not able to provide medication, shelter, and that person endangered his life and the lives of others. From a fiscal perspective, it seemed that it is more fiscally responsible to provide a healthcare solution rather than burden the taxpayers. I know there's a cost for healthcare solution, but more than in addition to the healthcare solution, now we have an incarceration cost. Strategically speaking, what are your thoughts in terms of us as a General Assembly looking at solutions to empower you and local county jails, which are operated by local sheriffs, in terms of strategically thinking about saving taxpayer dollars by providing that healthcare solution rather than the correctional solution?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it, you know, I dealt with it when I was a county sheriff because there was no other option out there. We had the ability to do emergency detention orders, you know, that had to go through a judge and a doctor, but that was only for 48 hours. Now, a lot of these small communities, especially small jails, the jail is the only option. And they're not equipped for mental illness like that. Luckily, at DOC, we have a facility in Newcastle that is equipped for this stuff. And you know, it's a tough question. I don't know what the answer is right now, but you're absolutely right. Jail's not the place. They're just not equipped for this stuff. You know, jail's typically a place for confinement of those that are either serving a sentence or they're going to be sentenced. So but I've seen a lot of offenders that are locked up in jails that are severely mentally ill.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and effort and energy. We have Mr. Doug Carter is out in the hallway, I believe, and will be up very shortly.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. That was an awful quick transition. I've got several members of my staff here today, so that if there are questions as I get through the end of this, I think anybody that might have a question, I'll have the appropriate person here to answer that question. But I want to begin by saying to all of you, there's a lot going on throughout the ISP. And frankly, I could spend hours talking about 2020 like I know you could. But fortunately for you and unfortunately for me, I only have about an hour with you, so I won't do that. But this is the agenda that I will follow this morning. The financial stewardship, particularly in these difficult times, is paramount, and I certainly recognize that. I take great pride in the work that's done within the ISP to get the most out of every single dollar you have appropriated to us. Training division, couldn't be more proud of the forward-thinking ability that they have, particularly as we get into 2020 and what's happened in 2020. We were a bit ahead of that curve before we really knew what was about to happen. We made some significant changes to the upcoming 80th graduation of state police recruits that I can talk more about over time. The construction at the Fort Wayne Laboratory, I know Senator Brown, it's up in your area. The construction is going really, really well. I'm very pleased. It's under budget, which is really good news, and I think it's going to meet our needs for a long, long time. Again, we can talk more about the Lowell Laboratory and the Evansville. And finally, the unmanned aerial system that we established and built specifically for crash reconstruction over the last year has just paid huge dividends, and there's a lot to talk about there. And finally, I'll talk about body cameras towards the end of the presentation. Again, devoted to gaining the full value out of every single dollar. That's what you should expect of me, and we work tirelessly to reach that end. Approximately $11 million is what we receive in federal grants to function outside of general fund appropriations and other dedicated funds. We have a long-standing relationship with the city of Greenwood, and I'm really, really excited about what's happened there. We built a new hangar that we are actually leasing from the city of Greenwood that they paid for. And they built it really to our specifications. I'm very proud of it. It's 16,000 square feet. And will meet our special operations needs for years and years to come. We have a very robust aviation section now that's been built over the course of the last 8 years that has paid dividends and dividends and dividends over time, particularly with the value of human life. We moved from the Mount Comfort area with the expansion and renovation of our Special Operations Division. It now lives all under one roof. The financial stewardship piece, I'm going to continue to refer to that. Our fiscal division processed nearly $65 million in FY20 of expenses eligible for interest penalties. It was paid within state guidelines, and we paid less than $2.50 in penalty interest. That's, I think, a true testament to the value and commitment and dedication of the people that handle the dollars that you give to us, and I'm very, very, very grateful. The budget agency, I know they're all here. Zach's sitting to my left, Joe, John, Kirsten. There have been times that we don't agree, but that's the beauty of a relationship. They have been extraordinary during these difficult times, and I'm very, very grateful. We all have very difficult decisions to make, and I certainly recognize that. And it's nice to have that kind of a partnership where we can speak openly with one another. And it's in large part because of the leadership of Zach and Chris Johnston, and I'm very, very grateful. My profession's changing rapidly. The way in which I present myself today is viewed differently today than it was even 7 or 8 months ago. So we are forever changing. We have to change the way we train. We have to change the way we train. And we're in the process of beginning this period of time. We have to make some hard decisions. But it's the absolute right thing for us to do. We can't continue to expect the same outcome and not change the way in which we train. And I've had the ability to explain this on several different occasions that my generation learned from an academic setting. We listened to curriculum, we quizzed, we tested, we moved on, we checked the box, we went on to the next course or course of study, whatever that might be. If we don't transition into scenario-based training, then we'll continue to get the same outcome. So there's a lot of changes happening specifically within the ISP, and we've already started that process. Nearly 7 weeks of scenario-based training out of a 25-week recruit school. working closely with the ILEA, Director Tim Horty, to again push that idea down to and to include the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 schools. Our first 5-week recruit school for the state police began in 1935, and just this month we'll be graduating our 80th recruit school. In this COVID pandemic and COVID period of time, we had to come to the table with some real ingenuity to figure out how to get through that, how to get through this recruit school. Clustered since last week with the cadre of our training staff, instructors, and students. Hope to graduate them this coming Saturday in a very small, really non-ceremonial way that, at least not like we have done. Associated with training, I want to talk a little bit about de-escalation tactics and de-escalation training. That has become really the language of conversation associated with police training and de-escalation. There have been a tremendous amount of opinions about what that is, what it means, how do we get to that place, and it's a very complex, very, very complex situation we found ourselves in. But we have to start someplace. And the some places with front level, intermediate, and beginning, the beginning concept of training a law enforcement officer in 2021. So the de-escalation issue will continue to be with us. It will be a part of who we are. It should be a part of how we train. It should be something that follows along that career path with any individual from any police agency, all 18,000 police officers in the state of Indiana. Cultural awareness. Again, this has allowed us the opportunity to take a step back and hit a reset. We've not done a very good job, and that we've got to do more. We've got to do more. The way we treat each other is real, and the things that we say and the things that we do matter. And I can just say to you that I've got a lot of work to do myself internally. Internally, I'm willing to have and continue to have, as I have had, those difficult conversations. The duty to intervene. The state police did not have a duty to intervene policy prior to May 25th of 2020, which was the date of George Floyd. We do now. We built that into our, even though we trained to it, it was never driven by policy. Driven by policy today. Okay. Probably the brightest star within the ISP is our laboratory system, our laboratory division. It's a division within the ISP that touches absolutely every single prosecutor, every single law enforcement agency in Indiana, even to include right here in Marion County, because we have a working relationship with them and their crime lab that we can complement those services. Our backlog increased from 7,075 at the end of 2017 to about 8,000 at the end of 2019. These numbers I'm going to give you are for the complete calendar year. We didn't want to bifurcate the year, so we'll reference just to 2019. I think everybody would expect that numbers are going to be different in 2021 for 2020 based on the experiences that we recently. Remember, we provide forensic services for federal, state, county, and local agencies throughout the entire state. The services include test and forensic biology, DNA, maintenance of the state's DNA database, identification of controlled substances, firearms, two or more comparisons, latent prints, question documents, case examinations. The division also provides polygraph examinations and crime scene investigations upon request. Our crime scene technicians are extremely busy. Won't get much time away. In 2019, the laboratory division received 24,500 new cases for analysis versus 23,800 the prior year. The lab responded to and worked 933 investigations involving 1,263 crime scenes and conducted 770 polygraph examinations. I hesitate to stand up here and give you a bunch of numbers. I think the numbers are relative to the final work product and the value of what the laboratory brings. The case turnaround time has increased from 94 to 127 days. They're doing the very, very best they can. We had a backlog on the drug side of the house. Working with budget, we've identified ways to reduce that drug backlog by outsourcing some of those analysis, and it's really, really paid dividends to be able to do that. So again, very grateful budget agency for sitting with us and helping us get through that period of time. The laboratory system, the laboratories themselves were built back in the 1970s, and thanks to this body, again, a huge priority put on public safety from Governor Holcomb and his staff, and certainly the budget agency. We are well under construction with the Fort Wayne laboratory and post facility, and we're continuing to have conversations about what the next step might be at Lowell and or at Evansville. So we will continue to push forward there to do the very, very best we can with what I know are limited resources, and to try to meet the needs for the next biennium the very, very best that we can. And that's my commitment. You'll remember we had talked about building a facility in Lowell and another one in Evansville, and I think long term those are still on the board. But again, we'll have to work through this very difficult fiscal time that we found ourselves in, and it's no one's fault. Just a photograph of the tilt wall, the tilt wall construction, concrete panels going up in the Fort Wayne area. It's totally changed the view of that post and of that exciting period of time. It's the first time in nearly 50 years that we. The Small Unmanned Aerial Systems Program, again, this was born out of a relationship. That relationship came with NDOT. And Joe McGinnis and I talk all the time and very routinely about active issues that are currently happening on our roadways around Indiana, but also about technology-based solution that might give us some idea or some way to minimize the traffic backlog, to minimize the queue, and to produce a high-quality investigative document that will explain to those that remain what happened. I am so proud of this. I never thought we'd have the success that we had. Less than a year, we deployed in August of last year. Be 130 times or so, small UAVs have been in the air reconstructing a very complicated crash scenes, and we can do it in about a third of the time. So I'm really, really proud of that, and those came through NDOT. The partnership that we have with NDOT. As you know, the roadway restrictions, many of you have called me or we've talked on the phone or about a specific issue that might have occurred somewhere in the area in which you have responsibility. And our goal is to clear those as fast as we can because we know bad things happen in the queue. Bad things happen in that queue, and I could go on and on talking about that. But this is going to be this will be a huge, huge benefit for us. Develop this asset over time, continue to pursue it. Now, the good news about technology is it's technology. The bad news is it's generally almost archaic and antiquated before you start. So staff and I have conversations routinely, specifically with Mickey James, who keeps me within my right and left limits from the finance side of the house. We don't want to rely so much on other people that we can't sustain whatever it is over time. Spend a lot of time talking about that, whether it be federal grants, which I think it's very dangerous to live by because we don't know what the future might hold, or two, if we invest in infrastructure or if we invest in technology today, how do we pay for it in 2 years? Agreement, or whether that be a complete switch of hardware and software. I've got to be very, very careful. There's a lot that we can do, very little we should do, and I tend to lean on the conservative side of the should do. This is an example of a total station on the yellow piece of equipment that's used by NDOT, has been used by NDOT for a long, long time. That technology is very, very high tech. We've now deployed 14 of those on the state, along with 14 of the UAVs that are sitting on top. I saw that in action, and one of these UAVs actually working, and it was amazing. From the time the reconstructionist arrived on the crash, at the crash scene, the time that UAV was in the air, it was about 10 minutes. Then I don't even ask what it does when it's up there, but it's very complicated and very high tech, but it just simply flies a pattern back and forth. They download the data, and out comes an incredible work product. So I thought the photograph was important. Okay, body cameras. As you know, the governor indicated and told us that that's about what we would do, and it's the absolute right decision in 2021. And we have embarked on this process of putting about 700 body cams out in the field by late spring of 2021. Again, a very slow, very methodical process to make darn good and sure that whatever we do in 2021, we can do in 2025. So we're being very thoughtful about the cost, about the storage, about the why we store, where we store, how we redact, defining qualified requesters, trying to solve those problems in rural Indiana where we still have a difficult time, some places, accessing the internet. And a team that's come together in partnership, of course, with budget, with the Department of Administration, and the ISP, I'm so very proud of. They didn't operate in a single lane. They've reached out to our partners around the country that have already done this, so we didn't have to recreate the wheel. And we're well on our way to coming up with a very robust, very sustainable program by which the body camera will be issued to frontline troopers and supervisors. It's important for me to say this, that is not the be-all, end-all answer, but it is an absolute tool that's going to help us into the future, associated with transparency and all those things that are so very important to me and to you. So we will continue to build a program that, again, is sustainable and that's functional and affordable over time. Okay. I learned over time that there's always some interaction here, so I didn't want to stand up here and available. My staff is available to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you. Superintendent Carter, you talked about how you're training in scenarios. Do you have a task force or people that are looking at the law enforcement training center and what's its need and how it functions in the future is going to be?
Yes, sir. Dr. Brown, we do. This is real. I don't like not being able to see you. We do, and if you'll remember, you asked us to do a capital study of the ILEA back in 2019, which we did. That is done. But as importantly as the capital improvement project that's going to be necessary to get underway, we have to change the way we view law enforcement training. So we started both, and they're almost running in the same way in parallel projects. The facility that we have currently in Plainfield was not built. It was built in 1974, and it was not built with the needs of 2021. It was built as an academic environment, not unlike any institute of higher education around Indiana. It's a residential facility, but the space is simply not there to do appropriate scenario-based training. So working towards that and identifying a decade-long project, I think, is the appropriate thing for us to do. And to think we're going to be able to just fix this in a biennium or two is just simply not practical. But I think if we objectively, keywords objectively, sit down and identify what are the priorities there to be able to get us to this point of having scenario-based training as a primary function of the ILEA, associated with experiences in the field, then we've gotten there. So if we work the problem backwards, we have a pretty good idea of what we have to do to get to that point. Understanding, though, right now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, right now we're not training anybody out there. But we're going to look for some sort of creative solutions and ways that we'll be able to continue to do this, because the backlog with our cities and city police agencies, county sheriffs, is going to be significant. But we were putting 3 people into a room out there, and it was a room built for 2, and it was a room built for 2 before COVID. So it's really a room built for 1 today. So many challenges, many challenges, Dr. Brown, but we'll continue to work through them. I know Representative Stierwald has spent a significant amount of time talking to us about what the future might look like. And we'll continue to make anything and all of us available, any resource we have available to you to objectively solve some of these very long-standing, decades-old problems.
Thank you. Senator Mishler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in the year, I had a meeting with my police chiefs, my county sheriffs, and a couple troopers, and I thank my post commander, Chad Larsh, for facilitating it. So any of you that don't know your post commanders, get to know them because they are a great resource in the community. And so, you know, some of them I grew up with, went to school with. And I said, so what has changed, you know, today as opposed to when we were growing up? And what's the number one issue? And they all said mental health. They said that's what's different about being a police officer today than 20, 30 years ago. And they said the training is still geared on what they did 30 years ago. And that the training maybe need to focus more on the mental health aspect of law enforcement and the things they deal with today. And so it sounds like you're trying to implement those things in the training now.
We're challenged with teaching people things that they never anticipate having to learn. Remember, we have to be all things to all people all the time until we do something that wasn't right or wasn't perceived to be right. And then we're the villains. We're not superhuman. We really are human beings. We will make mistakes. And the vast majority of incidents that we respond to, we responded to them. And when we talk about the mental health, Senator, and it's an excellent point, we're expected to be that counselor at 2 in the morning. And that's what you should expect of us. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be, because we're not machines, we're human beings. But the mental health component today, the place where a person with mental health goes today is a jail. That's not the right place for that person to go. So that's a very complex issue, and it's one that's at the very front of law enforcement leaders all over this country about how do we deal with that, because we know it's prevalent. We know there's an increased spike in violent crime associated with mental illness, just like addiction, and we know that the local facility of incarceration is not the place for that person. Now, with that being said, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to this very complex societal issue. We are one part of it. And one of the things that I'm so very proud of is that we recognize that. And we have to say, you know what, we can't solve this, but we might be able to have an impact if we have a relationship with DCS, if we have a relationship with a drug court, if we have a relationship with social workers in our local communities, because the needs in LaGrange County are very different than they are in Posey. So this whole issue is quite fascinating, actually, and we are finally to the point. We're finally to the point that the conversation matters. That's the optimist in me saying that we can now have this conversation. I grew up in a state police family, and my dad taught me that emotions are for other people. Well, I'm a pretty emotional guy. And I don't say that to bring discredit upon my deceased father, but it was a different period of time. It was just a different period of time. And I can tell you that it's not hard for me to close my eyes and think of the things that my eyes have seen and sob like a little boy. Mental health is real, and it's important, and it affects all of us. It affects all of us.
Thank you for answering that. The second thing is the body camera. So I'm looking in the numbers, and it has a $1. So is there an estimated cost? I know in the past we've discussed it, but I don't know if there's ever a cost to do the body cameras or what the estimated cost is.
Well, I'd like for you to say congratulations, you did this for $1.
Well, I thought it was a typo, maybe.
Please.
Free money? Is that what it is?
Well, so if I can, Mr. Chairman, thanks. So yeah, as part of this process, we don't have an exact amount yet. I mean, there's going to be some personnel costs for the department, some purchasing costs, some IT support, things like that. And so we just put in the $1 for now with the idea in the governor's budget, assuming we don't have an exact number at that point, but $1 with augmentation authority, with our hope that we can come back to you at some point during this process and say, hey, obviously it's not $1, here's the real amount, but just wanted to kind of create a separate line item so we could all be transparent about that being something separate from just their main
Isn't
operating.
there two parts to that? So it'd be upfront costs for the cameras, and then I believe you said at one point there's an ongoing fee for the service. of the cameras and things like that. The storage, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. So, and you'll break that down in the budget then?
Yep.
My hope and commitment to Zach and his staff was that we don't ebb and flow this. I think, again, long-term sustainability, if we can budget X number of dollars annually, and that number be the same each calendar year, then every fifth year or sixth year, whenever the hardware and software needs to be replaced, we don't have a huge request or a huge ask again. So I certainly hope that's where we'll get. That's what I committed to Zach we would work towards. And still the numbers aren't quite known yet. The RFP will go out sometime after the first of the year.
Senator Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, for coming in. Going back to body cams are great if they're used appropriately or if they're on at the time it needs to be on. What will be the internal policies when we're requiring officers when to turn the camera on and issues like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Senator Melton, and the answer is I'm not quite sure yet. It would be easy to come up with an answer of always. But then if you start thinking about what does always mean, it becomes very problematic. So we're currently reviewing from the legal perspective what other agencies have done, and there's empirical information and empirical data out there that will help us make that final decision. But what I promise you is I will not make that decision lightly. I will not take that decision lightly. I'll put a tremendous amount of thought into it because it has such consequence. My concern about the cameras themselves is they're mechanical, even though they're high tech. They can come on automatically with certain things happening with the body, if the body's upright or laying down, if a pistol is drawn and the like. The camera can be told to come on. But it can also get knocked off. Things can happen outside the view of the camera. But at the end of the day, if it's not on, it's not going to record anything. So I think technology is going to help us solve that problem, Senator. I think we're going to find ourselves in a pretty good place.
I've seen some states one of the requirements is serving a warrant that it should be on, just as you were looking at some models, states like I know Kentucky is exploring that as well when it comes down to dealing with the no-knock warrants and have an officer requiring them to have their body cam on at the time of them serving a warrant, things like that.
If you're actually in a police action, that camera will be on. I can say that to you. Sometimes things happen very quickly in our world, but with a pre-planned event like that, Senator, absolutely correct.
All right, thank you.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Superintendent Carter. So the partnership with NDOT for the drones, so I assume that means they purchase them and maintain them, et cetera?
We maintain them. The asset is actually transferred to us.
Okay.
They gave us the funding to be able to do that.
Are you using those drones for anything else besides traffic accidents?
Very rarely, very rarely. And there is a documentation trail of every single time that UAV goes up, but we will not use it for any other reason. It took about 9 months for us to get the authority to actually put those drones in the air, UAVs, not drones, UAVs in the air. And we're very, very, very careful about throwing them in the air for any other reason other than accident reconstruction.
9 months to get that from the FAA or who?
Yes.
Yes, so you can't use them for other criminal investigations?
We can with cause and with a reason. But what we won't do is we won't fly those UAVs over people, as an example, to monitor people. That's not what they're for. Or to look inside of a window. That's not what they're for. There have been a lot of agencies around this country that thought the UAV is going to be the be-all, end-all. And then they issue it without a lot of protocol or with a lot of policy, without SOPs governing its use. And we have not done that. We've taken a very slow look at it, and we didn't do it because it was the right thing to do at the time. We did it because it was the right thing to do over time.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
No, that does help. And with respect to the body cameras, I mean, that could be a big number. I understand, appreciate the reason for it. But I'm curious, when you said even with them, at some places in the state, there's not internet access. Are the cars, the state police cars now currently equipped as hotspots?
Yes, and that technology will be installed into the vehicle when they go into, well, for all of them actually, whether it's in Indianapolis or in a very rural county around the state. I think that we've come up with a solution where that vehicle will be the hotspot. And Larry Jenkins is here if you would like to continue that conversation, talk about the technology associated with it. But yes, we're not going to rely solely on the internet like we do with the cell phone in rural Indiana anymore. That signal will go through that vehicle. Our intent was that it didn't, that the download of the data, Senator, was not going to be specifically caused by a person having to do it. We wanted it to happen electronically. So there'd be no issues associated with manipulating an image or a sound.
Right,
So this allows us, that technology does allow us to do it. I am concerned about the sustainability of it though, because it's very expensive.
Right. I know some municipalities have turned them off, not because they were trying to evade it.
Many large agencies around the country have. They perpetuated a body camera program post-2014, and they realized the amount of information that's got to be stored and managed, and the technology to manage that data is incredibly complicated.
My last question is, you're talking about training of your officers and sort of pivoting a little bit, which I appreciate. Do you have any sort of a citizens academy for leaders in a community or interested individuals to sort of get a behind the scenes look of how your training occurs, sort of a community?
You know, we don't. That's been talked about before. We're such a large agency and we're spread out over the entire state. It's hard to narrow that focus down to a small group. But we try and be as transparent as we can be, and anybody that would like to know what that's like, I would welcome you. I would welcome you.
Well, I would recommend, even if you have to partner with local law enforcement, I had the opportunity to do that with the FBI Citizens Academy.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
I thought that was a wonderful program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Further questions? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and effort, and thank you for your hard work. Thank you. We are now in recess until 1 p.m. 1 p.m. we'll start back promptly, so come a little bit early. Thank you. So we're in recess till 1.